this reviewer named Andy says, say goodbye to your friends and family before you start to play. And I was just thinking, yep, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say goodbye to my family and I'm going to be focused completely on playing this game.
You owe me a pizza.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I want to talk about a very important game to me and probably a very important game to you, and that is Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And this is, it's a game that came out when I was in 6th grade. I'll always remember that, and as I'll get into. But I would say it's probably the defining video game of a certain generation. It's a game that I wanted to look back on, share my experience, the hype leading up to it, and my experience getting the game for the first time, and just some overall reflections. And the way that I want to do it is to go through some old issues of Nintendo Power. Now, I don't actually have all my original Nintendo Powers, but they are archived online. The reason that I don't have them is kind of a long story that maybe I'll get into in another episode, but they're archived online in PDF, and I just want to take a look through a couple of them. I don't want to go screenshot by screenshot because I've already filmed this video once and it was far too long. It would be about 2 hours. And so I just wanted to look at some of the major highlights leading up to the game because this is how we experienced the lead up to games. We didn't have trailers, we didn't have Nintendo Directs, we weren't able to have 10 minutes of gameplay to figure out what the game was all about. We had screenshots, we had magazines, we had little articles. And in many ways, the excitement was even more than it is now. So let's get started. I guess the first issue that I need to talk about is one of the first Nintendo Power magazines that I got, and it was actually from a friend of mine who I asked him to borrow a few issues, and he gave me this one. This is the issue number 100. It was a huge issue, 100 best games of all time. And also this was a time when there was a lot of big games coming out on the Nintendo 64, and they had a lot of previews of those games, which were really next generation games at that time. And I would say that this had to be one of the first times I heard about Zelda 64. And look how raw the graphics are here. Look at this title, it says Ganon's Back, which was just so awesome to me, having played Link to the Past, and just realizing that as epic as that game was, this is going to be an epic game as well. But what's really interesting to me is like the locations that are given in all of these screenshots. Like a lot of these are from kind of close to the end of the game, or just random, like over here, this is when you beat the Deku Tree, and that final boss area is lit up. There's some, near the Spirit Temple, a lot of Spirit Temple stuff here. And one of the things that we looked at and in these screenshots and really wondered about was, what is it with this button layout? What does this Japanese writing say? You can even see some of the different button layouts that they were using here. This was, I thought, a really innovative way of using the controller, mapping the different items and weapons to the buttons. So this was always an article that I looked at thinking, you just sit there and wonder, what's this game going to be all about? How's it going to play? So very, very exciting. Now this was in the June 1998 issue of the magazine, and the main way that we heard about new games was through E3. Now, as a kid, this was like the biggest dream that you could ever have, to attend E3, test all the new games, and that was always so exciting. But we had to read about it in, magazines, not on YouTube, not on whatever website, but even IGN was pretty new at the time. So, this was an article that was really good and showed a really good, preview of a more finished game. This was in June, the summer before the game came out, and you got to think, hey, the game's got to be mostly done. But yeah, it's still a little bit raw. The buttons are, they still have the action button on the B button, and the sword is mapped to A, which is a little bit weird. But the graphics look a lot better, and I think this was just a preview for what was going to be shown at E3. So they were going to go there, get some, hands-on experience, and have a little bit more to say, I believe, in the next issue. I remember seeing this one thing. It says, it's an interview with Miyamoto, and he says, there are 3 gems in the game called spiritual stones. And I just remember, that's kind of like in Link to the Past, where there's 3 pendants that you have to collect from the 3 dungeons in the light world, and then you can pull the Master Sword. So all I could think about this game was, this is going to be like Link to the Past times 100, because it's going to be on the N64, right? So yeah, I really liked reading all the interviews and just, seeing what little pieces of information we could pick up, what little clues we could get from the developers. And speaking of interviews, this is 2 issues later, volume 111. There's another huge interview and some really, really good screenshots that we saw, talking a lot about the motion capture that they used for all the animations. And again, this was just top of the line graphics at the time, which is funny. I think they still hold up to a certain extent, but really good information here from the developers, and some really awesome screenshots. Even a lot of spoilers. It's kind of funny looking back on it. There's a lot of bosses that they show that nowadays would be considered spoilers. And in the same issue, a little bit earlier, another thing that I remember is they had a special. They had a feature on video game websites, because websites were new, right? Nintendo.com, they're featuring it. Pokemon.com, if you want to know all the information about Pokemon, then you have to go to Pokemon.com. That's all there was back then. So this is really cool. And this was the big thing, Zelda64.com. So I remember going to the website. I think I watched most of the footage that I saw on like IGN, but really just funny because it's a sign of the times that there was a Zelda 64 website. I'm sure I would love to see it now, just to see how kind of primitive it was. So this issue is September 1998, and this was just, again, 2 or 3 months before the game's release in November. And you got to think, nowadays we have a lot of information about games, a year or 2 ahead of time, because that's how long it takes games to be developed. But here, it's getting close, and information was still just kind of trickling out after E3. And at the top of the, on the cover, exclusive Zelda update. Like, who wouldn't buy this magazine if they saw it on the magazine rack? And here is that huge Zelda update. And I just remember this article because of that title, A Gem in the Works. And reading that, it says, how does a game become a gem? In the case of Zelda, it's an intense process of shaping, polishing, cutting, and crafting by the best team in the world. And I just thought that was, it's kind of corny if you think about it. But I just thought that was such a perfect way of describing the game. And it got me so excited, like, oh, it really is a gem. It really is going to be perfect. They really did put so much work into this. So a lot of really good features here, talking about the pose, the graveyards. I was really excited to go into the graveyard and see how pushing gravestones in 3D was going to work. And I love all the art here. We got to see Ganondorf here. And seeing the Hyrule Castle, seeing the maze, the courtyard maze, just being very excited about that, thinking there's going to be a variety of different gameplay in this game. Very cool. And I was also very excited about the Kukos, being able to fly with those, jump off a ledge and fly with them a little bit. So a huge article again from that title, A Gem in the Works. I just thought that was really good. Now the other huge issue that I remember is October 1998. Now this came out in the beginning of October. That's how the issues would come out. The October issue would be coming out at the beginning of October. And on the cover you see Zelda Explored. You start to see these features being shown on the cover. So this is going to be a huge article as well. And I just want to point out that another way that we could see little screenshots and stuff from the game was in the Power Charts Most Wanted, because this was obviously the most wanted game at the time, and we always got a little bit of a screenshot there. And let me just say that one thing that I was very, very excited for as a Zelda fan was, you know, we have the Game Boy top 5, we have the Super Nintendo top 10, Nintendo 64 top 10, and Zelda has this, you know, #1 spot in Super Nintendo and Game Boy, but not in Nintendo 64. And I was just so excited to see Zelda being at the top of the charts for each system. So very cool, and I was very excited to see that. And here's the article previewed on the cover. And this article here, you know, I couldn't get enough of the art here. We didn't see a lot of these people here. I thought all of these Kokiri people were going to be like significant characters. You know, I didn't know. The Zelda art here is great. The Zora art also, that blue just pops off the page for sure. But the main feature of this article was this map. And I can't express enough how much this map it just filled me with wonder. Like, it just looked so huge at the time. You know, now that I think about it, I think, oh, you know, yeah, there's Hyrule Field. It's really not that big. You know, there's a couple areas here and there. And in your mind, once you've played the game so many times, it shrinks because you know it so well. But seeing it all covered by clouds, all I could think was, man, there's more to this map than they're even showing. Like even the Gerudo Desert, you know, you can't see it. So you're just wondering, what else is over there? What are they not showing us? And the caption here below, it says, Ocarina of Time covers far more ground than this partial map indicates. To count the paces it would take Link to walk from one end of the world to another would be a feat as exhausting as undertaking the journey in real life. Moreover, the worlds are barely half of what you'll see, since they will look considerably different when Link revisits them when he's older. Like, that was so exciting. That was so exciting back then. To think about him walking across from one end of the world to another. You know, we could see it on video, we could see all of that, but you know, just this little taste of the world, that's what, you know, that's what got us so excited back then. And I'm sure that if you were there at the time, you feel the same. So, you know, I don't feel that feeling very much anymore. You know, it's something that you can only feel if you were there at the time. So it's definitely something that I really have a hard time putting that into words, but seeing that map, I don't know, it evokes a certain feeling in me for sure. But this article, like I said, the game was going to be coming out soon, very soon. So this was really the closest preview that we were going to get. And there were some really exciting screenshots in here. Again, if I was going to go over them all, it would take far too long. One of the ones that I want to point out, this one of the Temple of Time in the, you know, the later years. It's so dark and very cool. The Temple of Time is just awesome in that screenshot. Also, this one here, items of interest. It basically shows a completed item screen, which is kind of a spoiler. I don't think that they would do that nowadays. But also this, I believe it's called Din's Fire or something like that. Man, what an awesome shot there. And you're just wondering how many items are there going to be and how are we going to use them all? Again, the wonder that we had. And of course, at the end of every issue of Nintendo Power, they would show a preview of what's coming up in the next issue. And here it was, you know, the November issue. The game was going to be released at the end of the month, and it says no more previews, no more sneak peeks, no more hype. Next month's detailed strategy review of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time will sweep you away and into the first stages of the game. If you think you've had it tough growing up, wait till you see the perils Link has to overcome in his adventures as a young lad in the land of Hyrule. I mean, and especially with that screenshot, I don't know, to me that screenshot is just like, there's a lot of action going on there. I mean, it's hard to, you know, believe that you would ever think that just from a single screenshot, but it's an exciting screenshot. You know, you got the Z targeting system going on there, and yeah, just so cool. And here it was, the November 98 issue. You know, it says at the top, the biggest issue ever. And this was huge. I remember mine showing up. It was in plastic wrap. And it kind of had a gold foil to it. Gold foil finish to it. And it was just so exciting. The fact that this was the biggest issue ever for this game, it only seemed fitting because this was the biggest game, you know, up until that time. And here's, you know, something that if you have the gold card, you could only get the gold card. I mean, this is what I understand, only by pre-ordering the game. And did I pre-order the game? Of course I did. I pre-ordered it at Best Buy. And one of the things that they had was they had an additional bonus for pre-ordering the game for $5, of course. And I want to say that they had, you could pick one of two things. And what I got was kind of like this little trapper keeper, which was so cool. And there's a space inside for, you know, some, you know, strategy guide, for some books, for some games here, and a little zipper pocket here. And actually, if I open it up, let's see what's inside here. I actually have some Best Buy coupons. I think there was something attached to this, I just don't know what it is. Coupon, $5 coupon for any Nintendo software product. Also, $2 off the strategy guide. Very cool. I bought the strategy guide from Best Buy, but I didn't use this coupon. Did it expire before I did? No. Anyways, the contents page was, again, the art here was just so good. And again, what can you say? I mean, this was everything that we were hoping for. Again, this issue came out at the beginning of November, so we had to read this for like, you know, 25 days or something before the game came out. And, you know, that's all I did, read it over and over and over and memorize these maps and memorize these, you know, steps to the dungeons. And what did you have to do? You have to go to the market, you have to sneak by the guards in the castle, you have to get this letter from someone. I had memorized it because all I was thinking was, when I get the game, I just want to, you know, go through it. I don't want to be stuck or anything. I don't want to have to go through this guide. I'm just going to go through, and I'm going to know what to do already. And I read it so many times that I remember in my computer class we were practicing typing, and what we had to do is we had to write like a 500-page news article or something like that. And I wrote my news article on this as if I was like recapping his adventure through the Deku Tree. And I went through and said everything that he had to do because I had memorized all the steps. I said he had to pay 40 rupees for the shield or the sword or whatever one he has to buy. And he had to crawl through a hole and go through this maze to get the other item before he could go see the Deku Tree. And I knew everything that he had to do inside the dungeon, from lighting, you know, spider webs on fire with a Deku stick or something like that. I wish I had a copy of that. I'm sure I saved it onto a floppy disk somewhere, but I just thought that was a way of, you know, expressing, you know, my excitement, getting a little bit of it out by typing about it in school over a couple days. So very, very funny memory for that. So cool. And again, some really good character art here. And what's funny was, you know, as excited as I was to hear about the game, I wanted to hear what the score was for the game. I wanted to see, is it going to get a perfect 10? What's it going to get? And it does get a 9.5, which I believe was the highest that any game had gotten at that time. But it gets a 9.5. And this comment stands out to me. There was always a comment from the reviewers, just a couple words. And it says, this reviewer named Andy says, "Say goodbye to your friends and family before you start to play." And I was just thinking, yep, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say goodbye to my family. And just, I'm going to be focused completely on playing this game. So that stuck with me, and it just built the hype again. Because again, this came out at the beginning of November. You have to wait 25 more days, almost a month, to play the game. And how painful is that going to be? And really, that whole article was all about spoilers. I would never read something like that nowadays, but you know, at that time I was just desperate for information. And something that was really cool to me also was, in this same magazine, Not only did it have a 9.5 for that game, but Turok 2 also got a 9.2. I wasn't a big Turok fan, but for those two games to be released at the same time and both be over a 9, that was really rare for Nintendo Power. That was really rare. Not only that, but there was other good games being released. Buck Bumble, I know that that's not like a crazy game, but I remember 8.2 was a respectable rating at the time. And even Glover, like Glover was apparently a good game. It says, although Glover doesn't have the big name like Zelda or Turok 2, it's a quality game that won't disappoint. And I was like, wow, this game must be pretty good because they're mentioning it in the same sentence as those other games, which obviously they're above a 9. So a very cool issue. Like I said, I don't have it anymore, but it was so worn out because I was just going through it back and forth through the entire month leading up to the release of the game. And the game was being released on November 25th, and that was actually the Wednesday that school was going to get out for Thanksgiving break. Not only that, but it was going to be my birthday that weekend, and the game was going to be my birthday gift. So I just remember that day being a very long day. I just remember getting to that midpoint of the day being like, wow, I'm almost there, just looking at the clock. And I remember going home. It was kind of a gloomy day, and my brother actually was working at Best Buy at the time, and what he told me was, I'll pick up the game on my way home from work. And I didn't expect him to be home until maybe after dinner, but actually he got home a little bit early that day. So I was able to start playing the game at about 4 o'clock, and I played it all evening. I had all the steps of what to do memorized, so I just went straight through, did the first dungeon, might take a little break for a snack, and then went right back to it. And I remember being so excited to see certain parts of the game. The first time you get into Hyrule Field, I remember, being so excited to go into, Castle Town and getting to the castle. I remember getting to Kakariko Village and, finally being able to do that little Kuko's side quest where you have to throw all of the Kukos into the fence. That night I made it through Dodongo's cavern, and I remember just being, in the cavern. It's so dark and all the lights are off, in my room, and I'm playing. And, I finally realized after I beat that dungeon, I should probably go to sleep. So I woke up the next morning, went through and beat Jabu Jabu's belly, and I had all the 3 stones. I went to pull the Master Sword, but then it was about, noon, and it was Thanksgiving that day. So I had to stop playing for a little bit. But I just remember ending on the fact of, I became adult Link. And it was just such a huge change, and I remember just being so excited to see what the rest of the game was gonna hold. So when I went back to the game, I was adult Link, and this was as far as the Nintendo Power walkthrough had gone, so I was basically on my own. And I kind of felt like I was entering like a phase of like being a mature gamer, which is kind of funny, Link becoming an adult and me being all on my own to figure out this game for myself. And that really hit me when I finally figured out of how to get the hook shot, and that I needed to use the hook shot to get into the forest temple. And I remember, seeing that little branch of the tree and shooting it with the hook shot, and finally getting into the forest temple and just being so excited, like, wow, I really accomplished this. I really accomplished this by myself. So, and again, I was turning 11 that weekend. So to be that age and to be playing a mature type game, I was really, really excited about that. And the forest temple itself, that's a really complicated dungeon, looking at all the paintings of the pose and figuring out the order that you have to do them in, and all the climbing on the walls. Like, it's probably, I would say it's probably my favorite Zelda dungeon in any game. The music being so dark, like I said, it just felt very mature to me, and I felt really accomplished with being able to beat that on my own. So I finally ended up beating that temple on Friday. Like I said, I got the game on Wednesday. Thanksgiving was Thursday. I beat the forest temple on Friday, went to the fire temple, finished the fire temple Saturday and Sunday. And then after that, what comes after the fire temple, right? Water temple. And I got stuck. I was stuck for a few days. And I just remember one night, I was complaining to my mom, like, oh, I need the strategy guide. I can't figure it out. I'm not gonna be able to beat this game. And so she was actually going Christmas shopping for, she wanted to get something from Best Buy for my brother. And she's like, okay, come on, let's go. We'll go get it. And I just remember being so excited, like jumping around the house, like, we're going to buy this CD and I'm gonna get the Zelda strategy guide. Like, I remember singing that and being so excited. And she was like, be quiet, like your brother's gonna find out what I'm gonna buy him. And the next week or so, I ended up beating the game. And I remember it just being, after dinner. And yeah, I just remember it being very dark. I remember the music from the battle, it's epic. And just the game finally coming to an end. And, it's dark, but it's very mature. I think that's what really stands out to me about the game, is the second half of that game is very mature. And to be so young and that being, one of the first big games that I had ever beaten, that was really cool to me. And of course, I can't talk about the game without talking about the sequel, Majora's Mask. And September 1999 was the first time that I remember seeing anything about Majora's Mask. And it was just kind of a side note at the end of the issue. It was talking about I think it's a kind of a game show, an E3 type thing called Space World. And I remember seeing these screenshots from this game called Zelda Gaiden. And I was like, well, Zelda Gaiden, what is that? What is that? And it looks so weird. Like, this enemy right here looks very weird to me. And this clock thing back here, very weird. But obviously it's running on the same engine. But it says the word Gaiden means sequel. So this Zelda is a sequel to Ocarina of Time. And I think at some point it says, we're not sure if this is going to be released here. And honestly, when I saw it, I'm like, this game is not going to be released here. Zelda Gaiden? How weird is that? And it's, up here, I think this looks, this is just Japanese writing, and I'm thinking, no, this game's going to be released only in Japan, and we're never going to get it, and that's going to be terrible. But, or maybe it's going to be released on like the 64DD, I don't know, something like that. But sure enough, in that next issue, again, a little bit more of a recap from this thing called Space World. There were more images, and again, look at this very weird painting here. And I just thought it was so unusual that it didn't seem like it was really going to be released. Really didn't seem like it. And like this, this picture of, the Skull Kid with the Majora's Mask, I'm like, this is not going to be a real game. Even the second one, look at these. I just thought that the art was so unusual. And this just seems like one of these gimmicky games that it's going to be released in Japan. It's not going to come here. And we are not going to get this. And even a description of the game about how the moon is falling or something, and they were really unclear about any details of the game. And they said it's going to require an expansion pack to handle this amount of action. And I'm like, yeah, no, this is a weird game. This is not going to be a real game. So, I mean, sure enough, it wasn't too long after that, maybe a year later, that the game came out, and all those questions were answered. But it wasn't called Zelda Gaiden anymore, but I always thought that was a really cool, kind of a cool name for it. Anyways, those are my memories on Ocarina of Time. I hope you could connect with some of them. Hopefully the memories of going through the pages of Nintendo Power and just trying to, put ourselves back in those days, flipping through those pages, looking so closely at the screenshots, and being filled with wonder. Anyways, were you following along with Nintendo Power back in the day? And do you remember these issues and these articles? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time.